just get started. I mean, there's always reason not to do it. Specifically on investors, it's like a marriage. Your child is the company, pick the right partner. It takes a long time to build up trust, but you can lose it within like a moment. If you want to enter a different market without having proper connection, your chances of success really diminishes. It's better to have a strong team than just have a couple of strong players. At least start something on the side then, if you don't have the means or the resource to do that full time. Start on your weekends. You need to carve out time to do that. But yeah, if you cannot do it in those kind of days, then definitely entrepreneurship is not a thing. Entrepreneurship is much more about execution than it is about ID.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unseen Ventures podcast. I'm Kiavaizare. I'm very excited for today's guest, Dennis Tan. Dennis is known for CEO and co-founder of Dashmote. Dennis, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kiavas. It's a pleasure to see you after this time, and I'm looking forward to just having this chat.
Thank you so much. So Dennis, in your own word, who is Dennis Tan? How did you start?
Dennis is just a very curious person. I'm a big fan of people, tech, and entrepreneurship, and that kind of defines all my actions in general.
Okay, great. So you're entrepreneur, advisor for almost 20 years. What did spark you to start this journey?
It's a long while ago, indeed. Like I started in high school, but I think what initially sparked it is, I would say, it's my dad. He worked for IBM his entire life. I don't think I heard him ever worked at another company, and it just gave me the opportunity to have early access to computers, and therefore also the interest to learn coding, and which then led again to trying to build and create things, which therefore led to my first company.
So did you also study computer science in university, or was it just self-taught?
Yeah, it was just self-taught basically. So back then, I think early on there were some computers, but it was really small, and there was not a lot. Basically, it was funny because there were a couple of books basically out, and you had like this large yellow book called How to Become a Programmer or something, and it was really focused on just TCP, IP kind of like protocols, and the language was really sturdy. Let's say I learned myself mostly in C++ basically. Now you have all these fancy languages and like text wranglers to be able to make coding easier. But back then it was just hours and hours of like, the basic code. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what was your first initial company or business you set up?
My first business was actually in the gaming industry. I happened to stay up very late at night. I still do, to the unhappiness of a lot of people. I inherited from my grandpa that I don't need a lot of hours to sleep. But one day I was in a chatbot in MSN, old product from Microsoft, just a chatting program. And I happened to be put in a group chat with a lot of other random people, mm-hmm. which in turn put me in contact with two other, I would say, boys like me, from America, and we started coding stuff together. And that led to, let's say, the first software I created. And it's definitely like a teamwork software. Yeah.
So were you in America, USA, or
no? I was just here. So you can imagine the time difference, basically. Yeah. So they were just chatting, let's say, around dinner time, 8, 9, and then for me it would be, let's say, mid of the night, like 2 till 5 a.m. in the morning.
That should be challenging. And what was the result of that? Did you sell something, or was it just learning experience for you?
Yeah, so we created a software. I'll keep it basic, but we created a software that allowed everyone to create their own online game, like pixel games, 2D basically. So it was like you have a server base, client base. Nowadays it could not exist probably because the main user case was that people would upload their own pictures to create their own world, but copyright was not a big thing yet. So people would create a world with like Hello Kitty or Pokemon, with like their own kind of like spirit. And it became quite popular. And then at some point we just lost interest. But I thought like, okay, I don't see many of this software align. So I just not attempt to sell it. So I told it to my two fellow programmers or co-founders, you would call them now. And I said like, shall we sell it? And they said like, no, why would we do that? So we just split and I just went to do it by myself. And then I, in the end, managed to sell this software. And then I split the profit like between the other three. And that was kind of the launch of being able to venture into different things. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite super rare as was it your first startup or business, right?
Yes. First registered business, yeah.
That's super rare to see your first business or first startup turn out to be profitable.
Yeah.
And so after that, what was other startup did you start or where you were a part of those startups?
A lot of different things, basically. So I also went in kind of like traveling mode. I mean, my mom was not happy, but I dropped out of high school. Looking back, I might not have done it, but you suddenly have a lot more money. It wasn't like I was set for the rest of life, but a lot of money at that age. And I spent a portion of it on McDonald's, but beyond that, so I went to travel, I lived in different places, and you just want to meet people and try your hand at different things, so I import and exported stuff, which was completely different than software. I got in touch to manufacture really like parts of machineries. And I went to a couple of different countries just to try that out before thinking I wanted to give back, and then going more on the side of right now you would call it accelerators or incubators, but back then it was just like mentoring or finding other people who like to start companies or create products and supporting them. Yeah.
Were you also studying beside the businesses you were running, or no, you were just going all into the business?
So since I dropped out of high school, my mom, I wouldn't call her necessarily a tiger mom or something like this, but she was ambitious and she loved doctors. From my mom's side, everyone is a doctor. So my destiny was also to become a doctor. But this plan, kind of failed for her. So at some point we made a deal, which was, it's fine, you drop out of high school, but at some point I want you to go to university. You don't have to become a doctor, but just go to university. So I kind of agreed. So there was an in-between period. I had something running, but it was not all my time. My cousin was going to China to have a leap year in between her studies. She was becoming a doctor. So I joined her in, and then I also went to study basically. And later on, I came back to Rotterdam to study again. But I did a lot of things next to studying, because the intent for me was not to get my diploma per se. It was to broaden kind of like, say, my perspective on things. So I completely switched from a tech background to a business background. So I studied economics. Yeah.
You went also to quite a prestigious university in Netherlands. I think it's the Erasmus University of Rotterdam is the best university for business, right?
It's funny because I probably the university will not be happy with it, but I don't see it as prestigious. Also, I'm, of course, as an entrepreneur, I'm maybe less fan of, let's say, big names. I understand the value, the networking value, but I went to the answer short. I did indeed go to the Erasmus University. Yeah.
And so after that, how did you come up with the idea of Dashmote?
Yeah, so in the first year, it went relatively easy studying. So I added in my second year another study. But being on the campus, I felt there was a lack of entrepreneur support. So there were no entrepreneur events, nothing inspiring to start your own idea. So I would call the Erasmus University a very good university, back then at least, for corporate life, and nothing wrong with it. I also dabbled around in it, but I initiated more entrepreneurial efforts, basically. So I started an organization, etc. So more of the support side. Then at the end of my studies, nearing the end, I was talking with the mentor, and he was complaining that I was complaining about a lack of certain type of companies. So I made a jump. I switched to becoming active again in a field that was particularly close to me, which was the space of data and AI. I felt there was a lack of companies in the direction, maybe even so with a bigger vision. So the intent was not to become successful. The intent was just to push the ecosystem. I wanted to be a person within, the entrepreneurial ecosystem that was actually showcasing, So I had all the students, hearing my stories or joining the events, but there was this guy who was not an entrepreneur at that point, or not really full-time active. So I switched. I disappointed my mom again, dropped out of university. The university ended up chasing me to finish my studies, but I still to this day didn't do so, but maybe someday, yeah.
So, I mean, right now, AI is very big. In 2023, you see with the OpenAI and a lot of publicity around AI. But back then, it was very special to find out that, okay, the world is going to in the direction that AI and data is going to be really big, and we can utilize this to add values to the companies or to personal lives. How did you come up with exactly the idea of Dashmote to that we want to do data analysis with AI to create models?
Yeah, I'll be very frank. I didn't know to that specific. I only knew the horizon. So I think, and I still believe in that premise today, which was, I thought the amount of data would really substantially increase, basically, both in access, but also in the sheer amount, right? So if you look back at the day, the amount of storage space, a device would have, but also the way we capture data was very limited, right? So it started to just arise, when I was getting started. And now it has come true, right? But even now, I don't feel it stops, right? The amount of terabytes of data we save, and also the way we record it. There's such many more contact points, more content, etc. So that is kind of like what I envisioned for the for the space. Then specifically AI, I had a different. You cannot predict how it ends up turning out like this. But it was already existing, and we knew that data was a very crucial part to that. Without data, no AI. So for me, it was like just trying to get knowledge, trying to be in a position that when more of the technology would unfold, either by ourselves or by the market, that I would be in a spot where I could utilize this positioning, essentially speaking. And we now went into certain market. We have a lot of data, and therefore also are in a stronger position to utilize either our own vision on AI, but also the other, methods that have been established.
So for the audience that they don't know Dashmote, can you tell us about the services you provide now and the services you started with, and what is your business model?
I'll start with how we started. So continuing on that kind of thing, like, having knowledge and being in tech, that data is crucial. But yeah, we're not a data aggregating spot when you start, right? You have no data, and I wasn't friends with Larry Page or any big CEO to get a lot of data. So we brainstorm in what would give us a good position to learn more about handling data, amassing data, etc. And so we started as a visual stock image database, actually like a Google photo search, but then on stock images. And we did so by connecting with image aggregator platforms, which hold, let's say, all the pictures. So at some point, because we made partnership with them, we had the largest database in the world of stock image pictures. And that gave us, let's say, the confidence, but also the knowledge on what was possible. And then we moved on to create the product that we have today. On one portion, it consists of being able to get data from a lot of public sources. So we only use public data, and then being able to extract insights from the data, depending on the country or location for our clients. And then there are some very concrete user cases like trend detections, or knowing where your clients are, or and what you should be telling those potential clients. So one of our main spaces is the beverages industries, and we help our clients to know where to sell their product. And also in, for example, what drink goes with which type of food, for example. But there are many different user cases you could use the technology for.
So I think Dashmote pivoted so many times from being an image aggregator to working as a trend analysis or data analysis to, let's say, identify trends for big brands like L'Oreal, and now you're focusing more on food and beverage. So what was the reason now you did a transition to food and beverage industry?
So I would say when starting a company, right, and you have your horizon, you know your plans on the short and the midterm is never going to work out as you wanted it. I mean, you want to believe it is, but in reality it isn't. And especially, after a couple of ventures, you definitely know that's not the case. But what stays really important is, let's say, the speed of growth and the market fit. And then specifically for us, because we ended up starting in like a B2B scenario, validation and one of the metrics could be revenue becomes very, very important to that. So in our case, it's like a funnel. We started with in a lot of different industries, ranging from health, finance, cosmetics, etc. And then you kind of latch on to the thing that goes the fastest, right? Because you want to add more value, want to deepen in it, and you go where kind of like the revenue is, basically, to support innovation, to grow, basically, to get your metrics. And for us, after the 7 industries, we really narrowed it down to 2 that were really taking off. One was health care, and the other one was the beverages industry. And then beverages went quicker within one company. There was a global Fortune 500 company. We really got onto the level of definity of the CEO, and that helped us just spread very rapidly. And then it was like, okay, we need to really focus on that, like have some focus to utilize that opportunity.
Amazing. I know that you're now partnering with some of the biggest corporations in the world, and congratulations on that. How important do you think is the agility to pivot in the right time, in the right direction?
I think it's quite important. I mean, the core of entrepreneurship is that you need to have a certain confidence that you know things better than anyone else. You need to be foolish about that, right? But at the same time, you need confirmation, because it is not there yet, right? So it's always like a struggle between like being really certain about something versus being open that you don't have that validation yet. And agility, and speed of adaptation is like making small changes to get closer to that full validation, right? So it's always, each decision comes with that, right? So is it a decision because you don't believe in this? Is it a decision because you do believe in it? And pivoting is, I would say pivoting is a word. Pivoting seems like a really big thing, but it just means like adapting and fine tuning on your larger vision on the short term and midterm steps towards it.
Can you tell us a little bit about the countries you operate in or have offices?
So most of it comes from the business itself as well, right? Business side, which basically is like the request of the industry and the clients that we have. Their wish that they would like us to help them in different places. And then it comes from, let's say, a strategic part where, in our case, our competitors used to be consultancy companies or old methodics. And I felt moving forward that it was important to have some protection as a company, which for us meant going global very quickly, because I felt there would be, let's say, local competitors. And the third thing, I that is more personal. Like, I think we have an international team and we wanted to be international from the start. So you wanted to, go into that direction. And luckily enough for us, that worked out because all three of those things made sense, basically. So with the clients, obviously being Europe, Korean, we started in Europe. Actually, not in the Netherlands, but our first client in the beverages was in Belgium. And then after we had a couple of countries in Europe, they asked us, can you help us out in the US? Can you help us out in Asia? And then having to open office due to the time zones to support that. So now we have one office in the US and one in Asia to support our clients.
Yeah, additional to your headquarter in the Netherlands.
In Amsterdam, yes.
I mean, you have a beautiful office in the heart of Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yes.
So what was the strategic move to have an office in China? I think you have a quite big operation also in China, right?
Yeah. For me, I mean, I'm, I don't know, third, fourth generation or something. I do not speak proper Chinese. I wasn't taught that, but I had a mind. I studied there. That was one reason. So it was easier. I had a couple of places in Asia I had done business before. Singapore, spent some time in Japan, but China definitely had the clear. So it was easier for me to set up connections basically and build out from there. Second reason for us is that certain specific skill sets and also the market only took place there. So how they handled data and how they looked at data allowed them to be more advanced in certain technologies. In the end, we now do not have many clients in China specifically, but it does give us, let's say, a peek in the future of how it can be, right? So they have different rules around data than the rest of the world, basically. So that was good, right? So for example, they were the first one to work more with visual detection, you know, and also extracting information from moving images or videos. So that was a large reason for us to be operating or building, let's say, staff in China.
You previously mentioned about the accelerator, incubator programs or initiatives. Dashmote utilized government's initiatives in Netherlands. How entrepreneurs can also identify and also utilize these initiatives?
I mean, there's no right or wrong in that. I mean, that's the whole premise of like entrepreneurship. There's no set path, but I do think you want to complement the things you're less good at, you know, or the things where you think you can accelerate or have added value. And for me, these platforms, they didn't exist when I started as an entrepreneur. So from a personal perspective, I found it very interesting to check them out, but also to be able to contribute, right? So anytime we joined the program, we went into it like we want to get the most out of it, but also more importantly, we wanted the program to be successful. Because we had done things before, I had things done before, we could go into that. We were not distracted by other stuff. So we always wrote down with any of these programs, how can we also make sure the program is successful? Because for me, entrepreneurship is a lot about collaborating. So collaborating also means, let's say, being aware of the impact of, you know, the business on people, but also an organization. In this case, you were talking about governments. And if they set up the programs, I want there to be more support. So us joining and adding and becoming, let's say, a prime hanging board could, you know, help the next batch of generations would maybe join those programs as well, right? So that was my reason of joining these programs.
Great. And how much this networking helped you to grow Dashmote, and how much do you think is effective to have networking through these channels?
I think a lot, especially when it comes to, let's say, internationalization, because where you come from, you know everything, right? And the longer time you spend there, you get the connection, you can get help out. But if you want to enter a different market, a big portion of it is culture, but also business culture. And without having proper connection or start or entry level to do that, I would say your chances of success really diminishes. For example, how business is being conducted in the US versus Asia is completely different, and also in Europe. So joining this program, you get to ask these questions, you get to make the mistakes, and you get to have a playing field for understanding how business is done there before you actually commit resources and time to actually expand your business abroad.
Before I watched some of your podcasts previously, and you emphasize about the impact of networking. How much do you think is important to go talk with founders that they've been through what you want to build and try to ask them as a mentor or your advisor for your startup?
Thanks first of all for listening to my podcast. I don't think many people do, but I hope somebody gets something out of that. In terms of your questions and connecting with other founders, I think it's really important. I think it's also hard at the same time because founders are busy with so many things, but the willingness to help is really there because you have been through the same crap or same hardships, wanting to do that. And they will definitely help you prevent to make certain mistakes. There are, of course, a subset of mistakes you should make yourself or have no choice but to make yourself. But connecting is really important. So I think, no, not many founders will contradict this. But if you reach out, unless there is really lack of time, they will always be open to help out. Certainly I am. And it helped me out tremendously as well. I always connect with founders whenever I go to a new place, to understand how they done things and what was the best practice for them, at any step of the business or any step of the locations they're expanding to.
Wonderful. You mentioned before about you worked in USA, or let's say you did business in US. How is different startup culture in the US versus Europe or Netherlands specifically?
When I would say comparing, you have to generalize in some ways, right? So it doesn't hold account in every situation, but I think there are some obvious ones, right? So I think in where US, for example, and Asia are very, very, very similar. Is, for example, it's really about, let's say, familiarizing each other. It's much more about relationship management, a lot more than I would say it's in Europe, which is a little bit more transactional, which also has some benefits as well. But I think in the US is really the case. So I always say that in the US, if you ask for help, a lot of people jump to help you. But then after that, if it's not beneficial, it will fall very quickly away. So maybe not now, but in the old days of WeWork, when they started, you would go to WeWork there and you ask, like, say, hey, who can help me with this? Within an instant, you have like 5 to 10 people helping you. In Europe, it's the other way around. People are very skeptical to help you out. They want to have some proving points. But then if there's some proving points to help out, they will really commit and help you out a lot. So one is not better than the other. It's just subsequently different, right? Also, I would say a huge difference is that in Europe, also generalizing again, we're a bit more set. Living standards are relatively high. We're happy, which also makes us count that we complain more, because there's not much to complain about. But it also means we lose a bit of the competitiveness, So we do not have the same fighting power, ambition as some other parts of the world. And for entrepreneurship, it's really necessary, I would say, because you need to have this inner thing wanting to, spread your impact, spread your product, spread your skill set to outside different places. And in America and in Asia, that is a really huge difference. You think bigger automatically because you have no choice. So in the Netherlands, act normal, strange enough, worked really well in the past because the speed of things was a lot slower, right? Look at a company like Philips. They wouldn't buy up companies. They would just do it in-house. They would look at what the market was doing. Then they would just wait when it has a market fit, and then they would create it themselves. Where in America, because speed is very important, if you want to become the biggest, time is really of the essence. So the way to go forward is to buy up innovation, etc., right? Nowadays, because of the internet and because of all the development, things move much quicker, also for business side of things. So it's harder to keep up if you're acting normal. So I would say it's something we are still discovering. I think it's changing in the Netherlands as well. We're learning to think bigger or faster again. But yes, we do not like outliers in general. We like everything being equal, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that stems from that as well. So one is maybe indeed, I mean, that's my personal perspective, is like the quality of life, you know. So the kind of thing. And then the other part is probably being like, we are all equal. So if you have success, don't try to shut it off the roof. Like, who are you? Which therefore means like you have to do harder, to do more stuff, basically, to stand out, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, how is the difference in stakeholder management? Of course, you have investors and partners in Asia,
Yeah.
USA, in Europe. How is different? Because I mean, maybe one day you have some meeting with investor in USA and investor in China, investor in here.
Yeah.
How is your approach for investor or partners from different countries or industries?
I think one person is cultural part, basically, and then for me the general part that goes for any relationship management, right? So specifically on investors, it's like a marriage, right? Like your child is the company, and you don't want to rush it. You want to pick the right partner, right? The difference though between actual marriage and business is that you feel you have less time, because normally you start looking for a partner the moment you need it. In most cases, for people, it's money or resources, right? But I think relationship management, being conscious about it, increases the chance that you find the right partner, because we don't think of it, but if you make a wrong choice early on that, it ends up badly, right? And now we're just talking about investors, but the same goes for your colleagues, you know, your co-founders. It's you know, people grow and change over time, but you have to pay good attention to what people want, right? Initially and over time. You know, what does the investor want? Why do they invest in you? And, you know, what do they want to get out of it? For investors, very clear. It's mostly, let's say, a certain financial benefit. That's the number one, and then certain type of impact within, you know, the directions they like to invest in. Then for your co-founders or people that you work with, it's pretty much, let's say, growth. You know, wanting to see the world, adventure, etc., growing themselves, and then at some point, of course, also increasing their life standards as well, right? And that's why equity is important, or other kind of things. You know, once their success, sharing in that, right? Yeah.
How about trust? How much is trust important from, of course, investor aspect to you, entrepreneur, and from entrepreneur to the investors?
I think super important. I mean, for investors specifically, but I always say, I don't know who said this, which actor or which famous quote said this, but I mean, it takes a long time to build up trust, but you can lose it within like a moment or one day, and that's how we should look at it, right? And then you see it in politics, it's literally like that. But I think it's very important, right? Because in the end, in collaboration and in doing things, trust is paramount. You know, when things are moving very quickly, you know, you need to be able to count on others. And you cannot count on others when there's no trust. So any action you do, you know, the amount of communication you do with your investors or kind of thing is very clear. Like, don't try to communicate a lot when it's, you know, going badly. Do it all the time, basically, right? So you have to work at it every day. You know, you want to be there in the good and the bad times, basically, right? And the same goes for colleagues as well, right? Don't ask what a colleague needs when everything seems good, when everything seems bad, but ask them when everything is good.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the more important things. Yeah.
I think communication is the key, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you tell us about why some of the collaboration fails and what are the challenges? Is it because of expectation management?
I think timing is a good thing. Expectation management, but the problem with expectation management, that's mostly to do with how well can you estimate things, right? I mean, that's the whole thing about entrepreneurship, is that it's much harder to estimate things, and that is where things don't always match up, where there's miscommunication or misalignment, right? So when you're, for example, doing sales, right, one person might say like, well, it takes me 50 calls to get a client, and some might say it takes me 10 to get a client in, right? That's a huge gap, right?
Yeah.
The same goes for what you're doing with investors. You start a business, you will tell your investors, I'm going to grow this amount, or I'm going to be this value, basically, right? And then things goes wrong when the reality hits, and you find out your actual numbers, right? So if your estimates are completely correct, everyone is happy, right? Because that is where you start your initial relationship on. But if it is off, whether for colleagues or for investors, it goes wrong. And then communication becomes really clear because people try to overcompensate for when things don't work out. Either they deny the fact and they say like, well, it will get better now, or they will say like, I never said that, and then, fights start. And unfortunately, things either break up or the gap becomes bigger, right? And that is how you want to prevent, let's say, expectation management or, future forecast with any type of relationship. Yeah.
For when you're working with the clients, is I think very important to not overpromise and underdeliver,
Yes.
and focus on underpromising and overdelivering.
Yes.
Does it also work with investors?
Yes. I mean, the problem, however, actually for clients as well, but I would say investors are just the extrapolated version. So for me, at least in my vision, like relationship management is very connected to sales, and sales the other way around is as well. And I would say raising capital just has to do with that you're selling your vision, selling a portion of your business in that basically, right? So with a client, you sell your product, etc., right? So in this kind of thing. And then your question was around overselling or overpromising, underselling, underpromising. Yeah, the same goes for clients as well, right? But the problem is sometimes that in sales is that how do you convince somebody of something when you don't have any credibility yet, right? So it's not really overselling if you honestly believe in something, but it lays in the future, right? So it could be that you're selling something, you haven't created it yet, but you really strongly believe in it, but you need that client to come on board. Then you need to oversell, but it's not really overselling until the point you actually deliver. So it's only overselling if you actually didn't manage to achieve it, right? For investors, it's the same thing. You're selling a vision, you're selling a certain amount of milestones, a certain amount of revenue. And I think you're doing overselling job when you consciously know you cannot hit those targets, but you just want to get the money in. I'm not a big fan of that. But if you're projecting a future and you honestly believe, and not just you, but your entire team, and there's due diligence for that you can achieve that, I think that's a good thing. Reality, however, it is most of the time the plans don't fully work out, and then you have to figure something out. The good thing is that investors also know this as well, so they look through the bullshit a little bit, basically, right? They have more comparison material.
I think for clients or investors, if they're experienced with a startup, they would understand that the startups is not like always go on plan. There are so many various challenges it comes up. And what do you think on that?
True, but I think it's built into the plan. Now we are looking at a much more a mature financial or support system, so like investors, etc. So when they started, there were not many funds. Now there are many funds. There are more ideas behind it, basically. So there are different strategies to that, but it's accounted for, essentially speaking, right? So I think that's also how valuations are being looked at. It's taken into account. But of course, the idea for an investor, they have to look at every case that even they know the percentage of success is low, that the chance should be there that it becomes a certain success, right? So basically, in America, they would probably do something along the lines of, let's say, we make 100 investments, 100 ideas that can be super huge. In reality, probably like 95% will fail. In Europe, it's more along the lines where it probably is, let's say, we make 20 investments or something, or 10 even, only smaller amounts, but those are not the biggest ideas, but the ideas that we pick, they have a very low likelihood of completely failing. So it's just a different model, basically, right?
There's a saying goes like, you're a real entrepreneur if you keep your startup running for at least 5 years. And I think with Dashmote is going for more than 9 or 8 years, right? So what are the challenges you faced during your initial years and even the challenges you're facing right now, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, first with the saying, I think it's true on average, basically. And that's also good for general entrepreneurs to not think something is a midnight over success, basically. But to be honest, of course, the number depends on the business you're trying to start, right? So I would say 5 years for a pizza business, which is also entrepreneurship. It's completely different than for software or something like this, right? And then to the second part was like about, let's say, challenges. Many amounts, right? You go to different phases. We picked a business where it was necessary to raise money because it's tech basically, and if you don't raise money, you go too slow. You cannot even execute on the kind of the plan. So a lot of challenge comes with that. Going back to your earlier question in terms of expectation management, when I made that mistake as well, right, where I expected to get to a certain level or to a certain way with a certain amount of money, and then it doesn't pan out, and then you have to make a lot of changes. So those are the prime challenges, right? Another challenge is, of course, the team, right? Any given person has just a certain amount of time and also trust, to commit themselves, right? Also because of life standards or other things they want to get out of the career. Of course, the wish is always to work very long with certain people. Personally, with everyone in the team. But the reality, I can understand, when things don't pan out, things go slower, or wrong decisions are made. You need to make choices. You need to make decisions. But people are not going to always be happy with those decisions. And that's one of the challenges, especially if you're empathetic to every single person. Those challenges come very, very hard. It never comes easier, but hopefully at least by trying to do the best as you can for the persons in questions, that at least you can go to bed at night, you can overcome these challenges and also do better with them over time.
Okay, great. You just mentioned about team building. What is your approach on team building? Because I think most people know that team building is one of the essential skill as a CEO or as a founder.
Yeah, so I think as a CEO, it definitely is one of the bigger things that you want to. For me, I always like to say, like one of my jobs is to create the perfect circumstances for my colleagues to excel in and thrive in. And team building comes with setting the culture, setting the norms and values. It starts with all of your actions, basically, and very, very clear and consistent about that, and how look at things, So you want to speak up, when some of these core values are being, let's see, not upheld, and you want to correct those kind of things. And it should not be something that you put on the wall, but it should be really in the actions. And then also in your HR, when you're recruiting new people, that you find people that are similar and not taking the issue route, right? So sometimes team building, you sometimes, or there is like a possibility where you would favor, let's say, the decision, what is better for the business, take this perfect coder or this perfect salesperson. But if they don't have the values and you still pick them just because they're good, your company culture will go down. Therefore, also your team building, right? So it's better to have a strong team than just have a couple of strong players. But the reality, it's sometimes hard to make those choices because, you want to have quicker success, and then leaning on one person, even if they have no lesser ethical standards or something, it's very easy made. So I hope I always am very strict to that, to my managers, to pick the right people.
So you're focusing a lot on building a good culture. So not only focusing on what talent or knowledge that person have, but also the culture is going to bring, or ability to adopt your company culture, right?
Number one. I think skills, although some people are more experienced at start, I think with enough time and trust, people can learn anything and they can do everything that's possible. Of course, in reality, you don't have always the time to unfold that, but that is the premise. Rather than, it's much harder to change persons who are fundamentally not aligned with your norms of value. That is something that comes from the core. You cannot change that. So that should be your set base, basically, to find people that connect well with the company culture and the values.
Okay, great. I think I heard this from multiple entrepreneurs that they said it's very important to build the right culture from beginning. You started your company with your brother, Stefan.
Yeah.
And I know both of you a little bit, and I understand that both of you have a different character. How does your collaboration go?
Um, so there are two camps on that. I don't know what the percentage are. So there are people who really love. I work with my brother, and there are people who really do not like it. It probably has to do with like how you personally look at those kind of relationship. Obviously, me working with my brother, I see benefits. Otherwise, I might have stopped. I think one of the good things is that there's certain bond that's unbreakable, right? We never fought when we were young, never longer than 24 hours, right? It could be really intense, but never longer than 24 hours. So I would say that was really that is really a benefit of working. And then on the other side, I think from a co-founder perspective, especially early stage, it's really important that you don't have the same personality or the same skill set, because at the start you're doing a lot of things. You want to be more complementary. In my case, I'm lucky that my brother is completely different than me. Maybe some people would even say 180 on a lot of different things, but it is perfect in the early stage, basically. So we have very clear definition of who does what within the business, and that has only grown over time. Yeah.
Great. I think one of the most important thing would be the trust. When you're working with your brother, you're kind of sure that nothing gonna go wrong in terms of like trust issues.
Exactly. Yeah.
So about people, individuals that they want to start their own startup, what main advices would you give to them?
I think the number one obvious that a lot of people say, let's just get started. I mean, there's always reason not to do it, and I can understand where those questions come from. But I would say just get started. And if you have a hard time doing that, put yourself in a situation where there is no opportunity but not to do that, right? So generally, a lot of entrepreneurs stand up because they have no choice. That's why in America, I think you have more entrepreneurs, right? There's less safety net, and it's the only option to get out of the situation. But I want to give for once a different type of advice, basically, which has more to do with funding. Because a lot of people who want to start a company, they always say, like, I don't have money. I don't, IDs is normally not the issue, but it's normally like money. Like, yeah, I have lack of money. I cannot, I need money to start. How do I fundraise, etc. I disagree. I understand to a certain extent that's the kind of case, and then maybe I feel more cocky or something like that. That's not my intent. Because how I believe is like, if you believe super hard in what you're doing and you build some validation on it, and you don't need any money to get validation, you can talk with people, etc., and you really believe in it, money will come. Because in the end, getting investors in is just basically about convincing people of your ID. So, if you can never raise money anyways if you're not solid on that kind of like point. Obviously, you need money to have like the basic kind of like things, but those kind of like basic things, as long as you're not having like too far in life, like a lot of, let's say, commitments, you should be able to get that amount of money, right? You can get a side job and just live, lower your life standards, which is hard for people to do, but that is something that's required, right? So to do that. So in case you do want to wait a little bit, then just get the amount of money you need for a year or 2 years, so you can get started. But in most cases, just get started. Yeah.
So you mean that just put yourself in a situation, don't wait for the right time. The right time maybe never comes, right?
No, it just takes time. I mean, I wanted to always start a non-profit or an NGO when I was younger. And then first I thought like, okay, let me do that. I was doing a lot of volunteering work when I was younger. And then when I started doing entrepreneurship, I had a lot less time. But then I was like, at someday I woke up, I was like, okay, shall I wait till I have success? And when do I have success? No, let's start now. Even if I'm just spending a little bit amount of time, it's better than nothing, because you need to think in that way, in that mindset. So for me, the problem is if you start first working and you want to become an entrepreneur, you start working, you don't develop your mindset towards that yet. So at least start something on the side then. If you don't have the means or the resource to do that full time, right? Start on your weekends or something like this. And yeah, you need to carve out time to do that. But yeah, if you cannot do it in those kind of days, then definitely entrepreneurship is not a thing, because it's an always on button basically. Mm-hmm. So that's how I look at it. Yeah.
A startup idea. So you mentioned if you have a solid startup idea, just go for it. You can find investor if you have a solid idea. But for people, they're really passionate about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
They have some ideas, but they are not sure which one to choose or how to come up with the idea. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah. To the previous part, not every idea, actually more ideas do not actually need money to get started. People always think money is needed for a business idea, but look for business ideas that don't need money, or at least not in the early phases. Then for your second idea, in terms of, let's say, getting ideas, well, that's the wonderful thing about living now. There's so much information on the internet. There's so many gathering groups and stuff like things to find inspiration for an idea. Actually, a lot of ideas also come from like working, because the best ideas comes from being in a position where you see something and nobody is taking care of it or improving it, and then discussing that with a lot of people. I do not like when people say like, I cannot tell you my idea, you're gonna steal it. It's bullshit, because in the end, entrepreneurship is much more about execution than it is about idea in like 99% of the occasions, right? Like the idea is never the issue. It's really about, let's say, how you execute on that idea, you know. And it's pretty good if a lot of people have the same idea, because that means there is interest. There's a market need for it. If you're the only one with an idea, that pretty much mean either it's super genius, or there's just no market for it. And that goes for every idea. I mean, Google was definitely not the first. It was a sheer executional thing, better than any other search machine or starting point before. And that goes for web shops, any type of large business you see nowadays.
Yeah, so execution is the most important.
Yes.
I saw today on LinkedIn a post about an investor was making a sarcastic joke about like entrepreneurs. They come to them and say, "Oh, sign this NDA for our startup." Yeah, it's only idea. Come on, idea is not important. Like you brought so many other entrepreneurs brought this idea, but it's about how you execute these ideas.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one, I read somewhere, or I think I listened somewhere, you mentioned about look to the technologies that companies, corporations, they don't have in-house. And do you think this is a good approach to find a startup idea?
Before, yes. Now, still, yes. It will get lesser over time. I think more technologies becomes more commodities. I like to put a parallel to coding. So, I mean, when I started coding, I mean, there was not a lot there. There were no GitHubs, there were no TensorFlows, there were no things for these kind of answers. And nowadays, coding has become a lot easier. So I feel like technology in general will become a lot more easy to approach, right? Like, especially AI will do that a lot. So I would say it's more about finding the user case where you can apply technologies using the methods at hand. And then, yes, still getting yourself familiarized with those technologies, right? So there's still layers to it, right? Like, for example, take, ChatGPT, there's a difference between knowing ChatGPT and being actually good at it, and then finding what can you do with that technology in a company that is there. And that's going to be a massive gap of possibilities for people and new entrepreneurs to jump into. Like, how can I utilize this technology for, the use cases are out there, because the companies they don't know. And then we're only at that first branch, because the next step is about connecting all the different technologies that are out there, like a combination between IoT and AI, for example, right? IoT is maybe less hip now than it was before, but also VR, AR, all of that are coming, and a lot of it will be connecting about it, and that is where the opportunity is really at.
This what you said resonated really well with what I see recently, that a lot of entrepreneurs, they come customized, for example, a GPT-4 model for some specific use cases. Yeah. Great advices. Dennis, I think running a startup like Dashmote should be quite stressful, managing investors, corporations as partners. How do you deal with stress and keeping a balance between your personal life and your professional life?
Is it stressful? Yes, I think I come built in with kind of a thing that I can zoom out very, very well. And I am calm under stress. Actually, in some cases, I feel more calm under stress than without stress. But however, there are certain things that, are much harder. Mostly, actually, it's not all of these things you mentioned, investor stuff like this. I have a healthy amount of, let's say, this point of fear or stress around that. But mostly, actually, everything is just people related. Mostly even from the people who actually don't understand how much I care. That is by far the hardest thing. Disappointing, colleagues, people who committing to your journey and helping out, even if they grow, etc. That's by far the hardest thing. How do you cope with that? I cope with that I just get really happy when it does hit the other side where it's positive. Basically, for me, I get really excited and really happy when a person in the company, a colleague, just is really stunned by themselves. That they are really, let's say, astonished about their own achievement. That they thought they were not capable of. So I feel my job is just to put them in a situation with a lot of trust, more trust than they might have in themselves, and seeing them shine then, and being like, whoa, I didn't know this was possible. That gives me a big motivation to keep going. And that's also an easy thing for the stress part. I'm not somebody who needs a lot of vacation. I do a lot of trips for business, but I wouldn't call that vacation. For me, it's just these tiny moments. So if I have a feeling that people are enjoying it, maybe not all the time, but in these moments, and really appreciate not the company, but their own achievements, that really gives me a good feeling. Yeah.
And what about the balance between your personal life and business life?
I mean, it depends on which entrepreneur you ask, right? And there are many large names who have their own vision, but I'm also from the camp that I don't believe in let's say, the dividing, work and life. It depends really on your definition of balance, but it's really intertwined. So for me, if you look at life, you cannot just be early pension or something, or early retire. I don't think there's any joy in that. So work is a big part of that. So better make work fun, and how do you make work more fun is if you working on adding value to others, or adding value through the actions that you do, basically. So in that case, I don't really have that line. I don't really make splits. I know there are others who do that. I don't. I work 24/7. Okay, maybe not literal 24/7. I balance it by having these joys of moments and appreciating it, right? So I do designating days for certain type of behavior. Let's say zooming out, spending time with family or friends, and then really being in the moment. That is my balancing act, basically. It's not limiting my amount of hours that I work or the amounts of time I spend, but making sure I stay sane, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. I think if you really enjoy your company, your business, it shouldn't be like keeping a balance between that and keeping a balance for personal life. But I think for entrepreneurs, that their company, their startup become huge, become unicorn.
Yeah.
Then I think it doesn't keep to just being as a fun, because a lot of responsibility comes, a lot of executive come join the companies that maybe there's not a lot of enjoyment comes to working with those. I mean, not specifically like really bad people, but it's just a situation gonna change the way you started with.
True. I think that comes with the phase, and if you haven't done like 0 to 1 before, you don't know which phase fits you, right? So I think the same with a startup, you don't want to hold on too long unless it makes sense, right? So also that is mostly related also with positioning, right? So as a founder, in my case, being CEO, it also comes to a certain question: when is the CEO doesn't make still sense? I don't like the title, because when you're day one, it's a different title than when you're an IPO company, basically, right? So if it fits you and you like the challenge, it's all good, right? But don't hold too long on that. I don't know when it will strike for me, right? Like I like to experience the different phases, basically, but yeah, it's yet to be seen. But indeed, then it changed. But also other things change, like when you get children, for example, right? Like your prioritization become more effective. But yeah, you have to sacrifice something, or not sacrifice, but maybe change things around more.
Yeah, change your priorities. So it's been 20 years, you're an entrepreneur, started multiple businesses. So do you feel yourself fulfilled, happy right now?
Well, first of all, I only just realized that it's about indeed to become 20 years. Do I feel fulfilled and happy? Yes, I do. The reason why I'm hesitant, because I feel like happiness is also depending on the definition. I don't think you should always be happy. I don't think that that's part of life, because if it was, we should construct life differently. But I think happiness comes from having not success all the time. You become more happy when something failed before. There's no straight line into that kind of like fact. But so for me, I am happy and fulfilled because I went through like a lot of hardships in the last couple of years. and then understanding that it has to be like that. But now I feel happy, and fulfillment is completely separate from that. For me, fulfillment comes from, let's say, your actions and your stuff do that. Then even in bad times, you can still feel fulfilled even if you're not happy, and this kind of thing. So it comes in stages, and I'm really happy about that, because as an entrepreneur, you try to push actually to the point where there is failure, and then you should be embracing the failure, learning from that, and then also embracing the non-happy part. Yeah.
Great. I'm happy that you are happy. What are your long-term goals for yourself and also for Dashmote?
I think for myself is to keep doing what I'm doing, and then I'm not just necessarily mean Dashmote, but wanting in my own way to add value to the world, right? Some days I hope that's also children. I hope my girlfriend doesn't hear that just yet, but that was my whole intent of becoming an entrepreneur, is to create wonderful things that add value, whether to companies, to people, and I want to keep doing that. I have a lot more ideas. I'm committed to, fulfilling this promise, and then as long as I can, maybe someday somebody has to take over, is more suited for it. So that is what I foresee on, let's say, a business level, but also on a personal level. I think, and then specifically for Dashmote, we just want to make more out of the potential. So we have a certain technology, we have certain clients, we have the market, and we feel we can apply it to many more things. Mm-hmm. And I hope to keep that ball more and more rolling, so we reach a certain stage. I would say step 3 out of 1 million steps. And I hope that goes into accelerated kind of like first thing. And in the meanwhile, I hope that my colleagues and myself have fun while discovering and doing that.
And are you planning to go to different industry, or you want to just expand more in food and beverage?
Both, yes. So obviously focus is key, but for this year we really focus, and also for next year to expand more in our current clientele. But we're already looking at innovation, and we feel ready now more than ever to enter into different industry, but also into different business models, while this one is already a bit more stable and more predictable, and we know how much effort we should spend on that.
Amazing. You just mentioned about NGO and giving back. What organization did you start, or are you part of?
So there's a couple of things, basically. So I like to change the way how people perceive charity, basically. I think there's a wrong connotation. That also has to do with the business model. So I would say a non-profit has a bit of a harder business model. It also has like a bit of a weird thing, because if people cannot live off what they're doing, and even if they put their passion into it, they cannot do their best work, which for me is very hard to see, basically, right? So I also don't have the solution. Right now, I'm having a lot of discussion on how to change, and what's like the perfect kind of like a model for that, basically. I also would like to change the perspective. So I know we don't have enough time to deep dive really long into it, but I was working on a product, or we have some co-founders in that. I work on a product on how we donate as it is right now, right? So I think a lot of my generation, or even the younger generation, they don't believe in the old methods. Basically, they feel like, say, corrupted people at the top who put the money into their pockets. It's also not very tech savvy, not digital, not proud. It's hard to do it. Like, it feels like if you, for example, in the Netherlands, you are part of the national lottery, which comes with like charity kind of stuff, that you're stuck in forever. You will be forever haunted by salespeople on that, or that people who come to the door with, let's say, a can to collect money, that it's for waste, because it actually doesn't happen at the organization. So we need to change our thinking and see how we do, because we do want to give back, we do want to help out, but the current methods are not fulfilling to that point. Basically, it should be more on demand, more customizable. It should be as easy as, let's say, subscribing to an app, basically, or donating just at once, basically, and also having more transparency on where your money actually ends up, because right now, if you donate to something, you don't know actually where the money ends up.
Exactly.
And that is something really a thorn into my eyes. I of course have a full-time being in my company, but I spent a lot of time thinking about it and seeing what knowledge do I need to gain to make a step into that, basically. And we had some couple of attempts, but I hope to have some more time in the upcoming years.
Amazing. I'm really happy that you also think about providing positive impact in this world. And I think that's a real fulfillment that gives you.
Yeah.
And I have the same concern that sometimes if you want to donate where this money goes, or even the money, if it goes to the person that you want to give or the organization, how much of this really go to that?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just a big challenge. And one of the things I really want to work on when I'm 40, 50, I don't know, later on in life, is that to provide, make impact for children. They are in suffering, because when the children are in suffering, it's just a great pain. And like, let's say they don't have just basic necessity to eat, for education, for basic healthcare.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to follow up on that. And
let's collaborate.
If there is anything I would just provide in this channel, or I would try to spread it out and even collaborate on that.
Yeah.
Dennis, thank you so much for being here. I really, truly appreciate it. And I was really looking forward to this conversation for so long.
Yeah, I'm just happy for the opportunity, mostly because for me it was just catching up with you, through just asking your questions, and hopefully we can do a beer or a drink or something, or share a dinner soon.
For sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for giving your time. And if you liked and enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. See you till next time.